Go ahead.
Okay, hopefully you can see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, I want to welcome everybody to the next in the series of our Money Matters workshops here at Family Promise of the Verdugos. My name is Bryan Schwartz. I'm a financial planner, and I've been helping FPV with personal finance education over the last year and a half. And over that time, we've essentially been doing all of these workshops virtually due to the COVID pandemic. And so we just really appreciate all of you that are on today's workshop Zoom. Today, we're going to be circling back. I felt like it was a good time can you believe this? We're almost 6 months into 2021. Time has really sped up. And so as we approach that halfway mark in the year, I thought it was a good idea for us to circle back on what was probably for a lot of us an early New Year's resolution as we moved into 21, and we were still sort of trying to get a handle of our COVID finances. One big thing that we're always wrestling with is credit and debt. And I felt like now would be a good time for us to sort of revisit that and go back over sort of maybe where you're at in terms of managing your debt and working with your credit. We've covered similar topics throughout the last year and a half, looking at credit cards, looking at managing your debt and dealing with debt, different debt repayment plans. We've looked at credit scores. We've looked at credit history. We've sort of been into all the nitty gritty of this particular topic. But what I wanted to do today was just sort of circle back in more of a big picture format. And if anything, the big takeaway that I want for you to get from today are perhaps some reminders, maybe some, I don't know, just some invitations to go back into your own situation and take a look at what you're doing and what you're not doing when it comes to credit and managing your debt. A lot of times we get into these habits or into these ruts of sort of out of sight, out of mind, right? And if we don't look at the debt that we owe on our credit cards, on our student loans, on those car payments and what's left to pay off, like we just have a little bit less stress when we're not dealing with certain things when it comes to our debt, right? And maybe for a long time, you've been meaning to sort of clean that up. Maybe you've been meaning to maybe apply for that new credit card. Maybe you've been working on it for some time, and Matt, now's a good time for you to sort of revisit these things before you move forward. So I figured here at the halfway mark of 21 that we would go over some sort of good inside tips and hints when it comes to being smart about your credit. So what I want to do this evening is for us to sort of go back over and see the big picture, right? And sort of remind ourselves that we don't really know where we're at until we sort of face it head on. So we do have to look at the big picture. What are some things that we can do to get into financial shape? How can we take control of our debt? And maybe perhaps there are some red flags that are popping up in your personal financial situation that you need to address. And maybe it's going to have to be me that's going to be the messenger, the bad guy, to sort of bring those to your attention. I'm okay with doing that because once we are sort of reminded of what we should be doing, that gives us the idea to sort of get back going again and get started again. So I'm definitely down to be the bad person here. And maybe we need to also confront our spending patterns as things are sort of easing up, coming out of the pandemic, coming out of COVID. I know that in the very beginning, we were super tight with our money because we didn't know if we were going to have a job. We didn't know what kind of income we were going to have. We didn't know how long we would be working from home. And we didn't even know what was going to be necessary. We were stockpiling, ranch dressing, and we didn't know what was going to be available to us, right? But now that we sort of figured out our spending patterns and we're coming out of this pandemic. People are being vaccinated. People are going back to the workplace. We're sort of going back to sort of some normal expenses versus being quarantined in the house. We're going to have to confront these spending patterns again. So I want to address all of that this evening. Just to touch on, again, what such a serious situation credit and debt is in terms of our own personal financial management. Take a look at some of these figures. These figures, though, are from 2-3 years ago, but the average credit card debt per US adult is north of $5,000. I would even say that that's probably even on the low end. Think about your situation, for example. Do you right now, in terms of the big picture, know how much you owe in credit card debt? If you don't, that's a good warning sign that you need to go back over, maybe open up some statements, maybe log into that credit card account and confront some truth and see what it is that you do owe. But on average, US adult owes more than $5,000. The average number of credit cards per household, actually, I think this figure is also low, is 8. The average American has 8 different credit cards between a Visa, a MasterCard, a Discover, American Express, probably some department store cards. Maybe you have a Target card, a Macy's card, right? These cards begin to add up, right? You got a mileage card for air miles. You got a card for rewards and points and money back, right? They start piling up. So 8 cards on average per American. The average APR, and this even seems low to me, the average annual percentage rate on credit cards is hovering somewhere around 14%. Most cards are in the 20s, to be realistic. I've seen some credit cards that are well above 30% annual interest rate, which is crazy. Maria, you had a question?
Yeah. I don't have credit cards. I just have I think I like credit to buy stuff and I never paid it off. It's not credit card debt. It's another kind of bad credit, I think.
Do you know, you're unsure as to what kind of credit that was?
No, because when I was 17 and I came to California, I mean, I kind of blew my credit away. I mean, I was just, careless and so I destroyed my credit. I don't know exactly what it was, but I don't remember, but it's not really credit card debt.
Yeah, and one way to sort of confirm what is affecting your credit score and what is affecting your credit history is, have you recently looked at your credit report?
No.
Okay.
I don't even.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. That would be an excellent way for you to sort of go back in history in the past and see what are the things that are still lingering that you owe and what are the things that are ultimately affecting your ability to, say, get a credit card now. Again, that's one of those things where for so many of us, we don't want to check. We don't want to look at that. Yeah, we don't want to look at that. But in order to move forward, to find a way forward, it's something that we just have to remove ourselves from emotionally and just take a look at it sort of matter of fact and say, look, okay, here are the numbers. Here are the things I got to deal with. And then we can start actually making changes and just taking baby steps in order to correct some of those past mistakes. The percentage, this is crazy too, the percentage of 18-year-olds, going back to Maria, what you were saying, sort of being younger, the percentage of 18-year-olds that have $1,000 in debt already, even at the age of 18, is almost 30%. So almost 30% of 18-year-olds have already accumulated consumer debt, which I feel like is too early, right? For people to be already sort of setting themselves back. I get it. Life happens. We have to do what we need to do, right? We have to purchase the things that we need. And oftentimes we don't have the income. We don't have the revenue to be able to pay for things in cash. We have to borrow. There are bigger purchases that we need to make. And, that's where we get in trouble. But to be in trouble this early on, man, we know then that that's definitely an epidemic here in our country. Take a look at this. The total US outstanding consumer debt is over $3.5 trillion. I mean, we owe. And it may just be that going forward as a part of our adult lives, it's just a process of borrowing and owing and paying off that we sort of have to deal with. But I do definitely believe that there's better ways for us to handle that and manage it. So let's talk about that. The thing that gets us into trouble is that there are two different kinds of credit. There's installment credit, and then there's revolving credit. And typically, when we buy things, we're buying it with revolving credit, meaning that we're using credit cards that have no stated payoff time. So a car loan, your loan is for a certain period of time. You're paying it off over 5 years, 6 years, whatever the length of time is. A credit card company says, take all the time you want, right? We'll just collect interest. So we're not in a hurry for you to pay your debt off. And for us as consumers, we sort of like that because we're able to stretch out our ability to pay. So maybe I can't pay this off in the short term, but I can use much more time, right? And that's what gets us into trouble, right? We're allowed to make just minimum monthly payments, right? I have a credit card right now, a Capital One credit card. The minimum monthly payment is $10. $10, easy enough, right? But the problem with that is if I have a balance, it's gonna take me so much longer to pay it off at $10 a month. But we love that too, because we don't have to put down large lump sums of money to pay off our credit card balances. So that's another way in which credit sort of gets us, right? Our interest rates fluctuate on a credit card. You may have recently gotten a credit card that had a low annual percentage rate, right? Maybe you got a card that was below that national average. Maybe you got one for 8%, or maybe you got one that was 0% interest. And you're thinking, wow, this is great. I have this credit card that has 0% interest for the next 12 months. I will totally pay off my balance in 12 months. But the problem is we keep extending it. And then after the 12 months, we still owe a balance on that card, and that 0% interest will all of a sudden immediately change after that 12-month period. And it will jump from 0% up into those 20, 30% interest rate. And now all of a sudden we've racked up a balance. Maybe we have several $1,000s on that card that we meant to pay off over those 12 months of 0% interest. And now all of a sudden we're hit with 30% interest on several $1,000s, right? And now our debt is just growing even further, right? So it's revolving credit that really gets us. If we miss a payment, if we're late with a payment, right? They charge us fees. They charge us late penalties, right? And again, that's where we also fall behind. You take that kind of revolving credit, you layer that into, maybe we have a car loan, right? Maybe we have a student loan where there's fixed payments every month, right? But we're paying it off over a certain period of time, 6 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And you layer on top of that the credit card debt. Now we're just juggling too much, right? We're trying to handle way, way, way too much. As I mentioned before, this revolving credit and these credit cards, the reason we have so many is we can get a credit card anywhere. Our banks can give us credit cards. Credit unions give out credit cards. When we purchase a car, a vehicle, the dealership will finance us, right? So they're not only just in the business of selling vehicles, but they're financing them too, right? We have a gas card from oil companies. Maybe you have a Chevron or a Shell or a 76 card, right? Even the federal government is loaning out money, right? So we're just sort of in this borrowing culture, right? And it's so easily had which is why it sort of spins out of control for us. There's a person with a question.
Hi, Brian. It's Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Hi. So you mentioned right now something about student loans, and I just wanted to see if maybe, since we're talking about how it can affect us in the interest rate, do you know anything about how, if they're going to forgive those pretty soon or not?
You know what? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Since Biden took office and his administration began work over the last 100 days or so, right? You've sort of probably seen in the news that Biden has brought that up as a topic of discussion, that one of his goals is to hopefully do something to lower the amount of student loan debt that is owed in this country. And actually, if we were to look up that figure, I don't have it in front of me, but actually the amount of student loan debt is actually higher than the amount of consumer credit card debt, which is crazy, which is why Biden is really trying to make efforts to get Congress to do something about this, right? So at first, he had mentioned, we want to be able to forgive all student loan debt, total full amount of student loan debt, right? Well, of course, private student loan companies had a hissy fit over that, right? Because that's how they make money. So for example, Discover Card, which also does educational loans and private student loans, banks that do private student loans, they make money off of that. So they, of course, push back against that. And then the last thing that I actually heard, Terry, was Biden talking about maybe not perhaps forgiving all student loan debt, but at least forgiving $10,000 of federal student loans. So if in the past, in undergrad or in graduate school, or maybe you were in vocational or trade school, or you got a certificate and you took out loans, they're now thinking of possibly forgiving $10,000 in federal student loan monies, but they haven't voted on it. Nothing is set in stone right now. So whether that's going to happen or not, it just hasn't been confirmed. It's only been talk to this date. As many of you have probably seen, or maybe even have done for your own student loan debt during the pandemic, the government did put a pause on payments and a pause on interest, right? So we've had that sort of relief over the last year and a half, but it remains to be seen, Terry, again, to answer your question there, as to what is actually going to come out of these talks. They have not voted on that yet. But I know that the Biden administration continues to push for that in some shape or form. So I wish I could tell you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I've been hearing so many different things, and the last time I called them, they were like, oh, well, you know, I've been on forbearance anyway. But I mean, if I could get that 10K taken care of, I think I'd be pretty good, because it's under 10K, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're doing right now is probably a good idea between the pause on payments, the pause on interest, and being in forbearance. What Terry is talking about there is sort of putting a pause on your student loans. And even if you're not doing that, maybe even asking for an income-based repayment plan, meaning they base your monthly payments off of what you actually bring home in your paycheck. That can also help as well. So there's different ways to sort of give you some breathing room, but yeah, definitely, I'm all for no matter what the amount is. I mean, any dollar would help us, right? So if it's going to be 10K, if it's going to be 5K, whatever, any sort of help like that is going to help a lot of people, and I'm all for it. But yeah, it just remains to be seen what's going to happen. So if you are in search, as we just saw from all the various ways that we can get credit cards, if you're in search of a new card, I wanted to just go over again what credit card companies and even other types of lenders, if you're buying a vehicle, if you're getting a student loan, if you're thinking of purchasing a home and getting a mortgage, lenders look at us through the telescope or through the lens of the 3 C's, right? That's how they evaluate if we are credit worthy. So if you've been declined for credit in the past, or if you're thinking about getting a new card, they're basing their judgment of your credit worthiness on these 3 C's: character, capital, and capacity, right? So if it's been a while since you've used credit, assess yourself in this way. Character. Have you used credit in the past? Do you pay your bills on time? In character, they also look at how long have you lived at your present address, right? So if you've lived somewhere for 12 months, maybe a couple years, maybe 3 years, maybe more, that is a part of the character assessment, because a credit card company wants to know, how stable are you, right? How long have you kept this residence? Do you continue to pay your rent on time? Do you continue to pay your other bills on time? How long have you been at your present job? Now, obviously, people change jobs all the time, right? And that's not that big of a deal. But again, it's an overall assessment of your quote unquote character or your stability, right? So before they lend you or give you the ability to borrow money, they want to see, are you a trustworthy person? Are you stable? Are you going to be able to pay back what you owe? The second thing that they assess is capital, meaning, do you have other assets that in the event you cannot pay back your debts, that they could essentially either go after, or that they could maybe make you liquidate or have you liquidate in order to pay off the debt, right? So do you own real estate? Do you own a home? Could you pull out equity from your home? Do you have personal property? Do you have other savings, other investments, things to pay off the debt should they need to collect that from you? So do you have capital to back up your situation? And the third thing is capacity. Do you have the ability to make monthly payments on what you borrow? So answering questions like your current salary, how much are you making in gross income, in net income? How many other loan payments do you have, right? When they take a look at your credit, when they do a credit check, they want to see how many other open lines of credit do you have? How many other debts do you owe? Are you paying those off? Are you paying them off on time? Because if they see that you have already borrowed too much, you're more of a risk, because now you're overutilizing, and they have this concept called utilization, meaning how much of your income can you actually use to pay the monthly payments on the debt that you owe? And if you take on more debt by getting another credit card, do you become a risk because now you're in jeopardy of not being able to make those payments, right? So the lender and the credit card company are looking at these 3 C's when they have you fill out an application, when they do a credit check on you, right? They're looking to see your ability to pay back what you borrow. So if you're thinking of getting maybe a new card, or you're thinking of borrowing money, new money, these are the things that you want to focus on, maybe perhaps before you do that. Otherwise, you could risk getting declined. You may qualify to borrow, but they may give you a higher interest rate because you're more of a risk, because you have poor credit, right? So if you're thinking, yeah, one of my goals here in 21 was to build credit. Maybe I had a bad history and I want to build my credit. What you want to do is start thinking about it in terms of these 3 C's. How do I achieve stability? What are the things that I can do to show that I'm stable? And how can I show that I have the capacity to pay off these debts? Maybe some of it means going back and tackling little debts. So as a personal example, my wife was in the hospital several years ago, and there was a number of bills that came to my mailbox that were not covered by insurance due to her procedure. So one of the things that initially I was not good at, because all these envelopes would come and I would just sort of let them pile up, right? I just didn't know who was charging what and why I was having to pay 40 for this and 55 for that and 68 bucks for this. I sort of lost track. And those little bills ended up on our credit report. Some companies charged them off, meaning they thought I wasn't going to pay them back, right? I had made no payments. They were sort of saying, Brian, you're a lost cause. We don't expect to get the money back from you. We're going to send it to collections. We're going to have another company hound you because we keep sending you stuff and you don't pay it back. Well, I check our credit history, and because I'm about ready to get a new vehicle for our family, and I see all of these hospital debts that had gone to collections and that were charged off, that were just destroying my credit score, right? All because I overlooked these little $40 here, $60 there, or whatever. So even these small debts can sort of poke holes in our entire plan. And so before I went and got that car, I was like, man, I'm not going to have a good enough credit score to get a low enough interest rate. I may not even qualify to borrow. So that really sort of freaked me out, got my butt in gear to take care of these things. So I really didn't want to look at my credit report. I didn't want to see my score. But in doing so, and just sort of removing myself from it emotionally, I said, okay, I got to make a plan to like start paying this back. So now is not the time for a car. It's time to clean this up, right? And so I had to go down a long path of basically paying these things off, making on-time payments so I could build back up my 3 C's. So if you're in a situation like that, you can definitely do it. It may take time. It may take a plan to tackle it, but it can be done. So whether you have small debts, whether you have large debts, I'll show you a couple of ways to do that here in just a few slides. Just again, to reiterate how we just sort of get crushed, because I think we all sort of forget there's such a convenience and an ease with using credit, right? I don't have to have money in the bank. I don't have to have cash on me. I just have to swipe the card, right? And then when the bill comes, I'll pay it. But look what sort of damage we're doing to ourselves in terms of time, energy, and money. Let's say we just put $500 worth of stuff, right? The random stuff that we buy, right, on a credit card. And let's just say our APR, our annual percentage rate on that credit card is 18%. And we just make the minimum monthly payment of 10 bucks. That $500 worth of stuff at 18% interest rate over time will generate $431 of interest to the credit card company. So when we buy $500 worth of stuff, in the end, after it's all paid off, if we just pay the minimum and it's earning 18% interest, we actually almost end up paying double for what we purchased. And this just blows my mind. And this is the work of compounding interest. Paying it off would take us over 7 years if we just made that minimum monthly payment of 10 bucks. We're just not digging ourselves out of paying off that $500. 7 years. I guarantee you that the stuff that I buy right now that's worth $500, I will not have in 7 years, right? Most of the stuff that we buy now doesn't even last that long. So we would still technically be paying for something at that time that we don't even have. The jeans got worn out. They don't fit anymore. We donated them. We threw them away, whatever. They're gone. And yet we're still paying it off. right? That's what just sort of makes me go crazy when I think about credit and debt. It is sort of necessary. We just have to manage it correctly. And I think that's where we sort of get off the rails, right? Where things go wrong, right? So here are the warning signs, right? You know you're struggling with debt when you're stressed about your ability to pay down your debt. So some of us have different stress levels. Some of us may stress over the fact that we have 500, and somebody else next to us could say, 500, I only wish I only owed 500. You know, I owe 5,000, I owe 10,000, I owe 20,000, right? You have more than one credit card and can only afford minimum payments. So if you're like the average American and you have multiple cards and you're only making minimum payments, you're not getting ahead. That could be a warning sign that you may need to re-strategize about how you're using your credit. You pay off other bills with your credit cards, or you take cash advances from your credit card. So some credit cards will let you pull out money from it. So it might have like $1,000 limit that you could pull out in cash. If you're doing that from your credit cards to have cash flow, if you're paying other bills with your credit cards, sort of playing the nutshell game with what you're paying and how you're paying it and moving it around, that could be a warning sign. If you just even don't know right now while we're sitting here how much combined debt you actually have, then that just means that you're not paying attention. You're not aware, your eyes aren't on what you owe. And you can't just say, well, Brian, I owe a lot. True, that might be the case. But really, to effectively start tackling debt and using credit smartly, you have to know exactly what you owe and what your plan is to pay it down. Maybe you just applied for some credit or to borrow and you were denied. That's a big red flag. That's a big warning sign. You look at your credit card statements, your other bills, and those statements, and you have late fees. You just can't seem to pay things on time, because they're due at certain times of the month. You get paid on, I don't know, on the 1st and the 15th, or the 1st and the last, or however it's set up. And in between, your bills are due and you're just running out of money. That's something we may need to plan and rework. And like I said about me, if you're just avoiding opening your statements and tracking balances and looking at what you owe, then we definitely have a problem. And that's why I was falling behind. Mary, I think you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. So I recently just got a credit card through my credit union.
Sure.
And what I've been doing with it is, like, I'll buy gas maybe twice a month. And let's say my due date for a minimum payment is the 18th. I pay it all.
Perfect.
Is that putting me in the right direction to build my credit?
Yes, and I was actually going to make that point later on, but I'm glad you bring it up now as we're talking about the warning signs. So to begin to handle things correctly, like Mary, let's say you got a new card, or you're thinking of getting a new card because you want to rebuild your credit. Maybe it's been a while since you've used it, and maybe you're sort of scared to use it. The best way to use it is do exactly what Mary's doing. When you get a card, make small purchases. It might be 1, 2, 3, 4 small purchases a month that you know by the time the bill comes, like Mary is doing, even before then, you pay it on time and you pay it in full, so no interest accrues. That is the way to begin bumping up your credit score. And again, what we call credit utilization, right? So if Mary goes on to continue to do this, let's say for the next 12 months, she will see an increase in her credit score because she's properly using that credit. She's making payments on time. She's paying in full. She doesn't have any late fees. She doesn't have anything that she owes, right? Then she'll be able to sort of go to that next level and say, okay, now that my credit score has gone up and I'm using this card responsibly, now maybe is the time for me to hit my next goal, which was maybe that second card that I needed, or maybe now I can walk in and maybe purchase a different vehicle, right? So that is absolutely like what I would definitely recommend in terms of sort of getting back on track with how best to use the card without overdoing it, without maxing it out, and without falling behind on the monthly payments and only making minimums. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Mary. Griselda, I think you had a question.
Yes, hi. What about if you're using the maximum credit that you have on your credit card, but yet you still, when you get that monthly bill, you still pay the full balance on that credit card?
Okay.
Is that a good thing to do?
Yeah. So even that, let's say, you know, life is happening. You had to do what you had to do. You put some stuff on the credit card and now it's maxed out. You're at your limit, right? Let's say you have a card, it has a $3,000 limit and you sort of are right there kind of from month to month, but you're making payments and you're making payments on time. Even if it is the minimum, or maybe in other months you pay a little bit more, that is fine too. That is still a good use of the credit card. That's still helping your credit score because you are paying on time, right? The only downside to that is from month to month, you're going to have those interest charges, but those interest charges aren't affecting your credit history. They're not affecting your credit score. They're just affecting your overall balance and your ability to knock down the debt. But I would say that it's not like an inappropriate use of the card.
Thank you.
Terry, you had a question. Okay, somebody else has a question. CL?
Christian?
Hi, how you doing? My
Good,
question
how are
is,
you?
if I get good. Hopefully you can hear me. My connection's
Yes.
not that great. If I get something on a credit card and I make a few payments and I decide, you know what, I want to just pay it off in full after a few months because of what you just stated, because I went through that whole thing of minimum payment and having to learn the hard way of ending up paying double. So what do you think about that? About
Again, there's certainly,
making a few payments?
There's certainly nothing wrong with that. Yeah, certainly nothing wrong with that. If you're like Mary and you're just paying it in full from month to month, perfect. Or like you're saying, Christian, if you like made a couple of monthly payments and now you're just like, you know what, I have the cash flow to just pay it off, then by all means do it. Because you're speaking from personal experience and you know how just sort of making that minimum, you can sort of get into that trap. So if you even have that thought of like, dude, I just want to pay this thing off, like, yes, do it.
But my question, I guess my other question is there any benefit or is there any downfall to building credit by doing that? Is my real question.
No. There's nothing negative in terms of building credit when you want to come around and just pay things off, right? The sort of secondary question to that, Christian, I think that we can also ask, and hopefully maybe somebody's been thinking about this too, which is, okay, Brian, what if I have credit cards that I have some balances, I paid them month to month, and now all of a sudden I pay them off and they got zero balance, and then I just go on a cash diet and I only use cash, and I have these credit cards in my freezer. I have these credit cards like, you know, in a dresser drawer, hidden away somewhere, so I don't overspend. Should I just close those? Should I just cut them up? Right? I get that question a lot. Don't rush to close credit cards that have zero balance. Don't rush to cut up those cards, right? Because something that could negatively affect your credit history and credit score and report is if a future lender goes in and sees, oh, you had these credit cards at zero balance, but then you closed them. You closed a bunch of them. You closed a couple of them, and now here you are coming back and you're wanting to borrow more, right? So it's not necessary to close certain credit cards unless you just don't want to deal with that company anymore. You can certainly keep them at zero balance, and definitely you can hide them away, right? And you can use them down the road. So yeah, a lot of people ask me that too. Like, I've had trouble with credit in the past and now I got everything back down to zero. I'm so afraid to use them. Should I just close them all and cut them up? That's not necessary. Any other
Terry?
questions? Yeah.
Terry, do you still have a question? Terry.
She may
All
still
right.
circle back. So look how closely these concepts here are to each other and to sort of better managing credit and debt. One, if you do that this coming week, that's a huge victory. Just determine how much you owe. Then number two, connected to that, pay attention to your spending, right? So go back to your budget, go back to your spending plan. Oh, Brian, I don't really have one. Okay. Pay attention to your spending in other ways. Log on, look at your bank statements, look at where your money is going. Look at how many times you put something on the debit card. Look at how many times you put something on the credit card, right? Just be more aware of what you're using in terms of your cash flow, right? Are you hitting everything with Apple Pay and not tracking things? Are you look at what you're doing with your cards? See if you're paying more than the minimum.
Brian, it's Terry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to speak earlier, but I had it on mute and I'm driving, so I couldn't I was trying to unmute it.
Safety first.
What I wanted to ask you, Brian, is, and we may have talked about this because I think we talked before, but with the paying off the credit cards and all of that. So say for instance, we pay down, because my thing is, it's not so much the credit, it's the debt. Because I'm on time with my payments and everything, but I want my debt gone. So I wanted to know, do you off the top of your head know what they would, when you're looking into debt consolidation and like to get like a loan, one big loan to pay off all your debt, do you know about what kind of scores they're looking for during when you apply for something like that?
Well, most of the time, people who are seeking debt consolidation may have what we consider to be a poor score. So let me show this to you visually rather than me explaining it. I think this FICO credit score slide will give us a good visual. Normally, if people are looking for debt relief and they're looking for debt consolidation, most companies know that your credit score is probably going to be in the low 600s, if not even in the 500s, right? Because handling all of that debt has been affecting, perhaps for some time, your credit score, right? So what they're going to try to do in debt consolidation is, rather than having to make 10 different payments at all these varying interest rates and all these varying monthly payments, they're going to look at your 3 C's and they're going to see, do you have the character and the capital and the capacity to consolidate or push together everything that you owe into what you're talking about, Terry, one loan with one interest rate. And that one interest rate will be based on your credit score. But most of the time, that credit score has taken a hit because you've been having to deal with this debt. And generally, people seeking debt consolidation, their credit score is going to be in the low 6, if not into the 500s, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But one thing I was trying to avoid is, I don't know if I shared this with you or with Lisa. is instead of, because we consulted with someone with the debt consolidation, and they wanted us to stop paying our bills for like 60 days. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's not where I'm going with this. You know, I don't want to do that. Because then we don't even know if our creditors would even work with you. You know, because the bulk of our debt is not even credit card debt, it's loan debt. Like we had to fix a car and we had to take a loan out from these little loan companies, and they charge crazy amounts of interest. So I'm more concerned, like I want to try to see where I have to be at my credit score to get like a bank or a credit union to give us a loan, and we pay them at that point, you know, to pay off our debt. Because I was actually considering taking it out of my 401k, but it's not enough to cover all the debt right now, you know?
And honestly, Terry, I know when you're in that situation, you're sort of incentivized, or you're sort of pushed to go, okay, what are the solutions? What are the solutions? I'll just take from my 401k. But that would actually be doing yourself even more harm, as you know. That would be a double whammy, because you would be borrowing against your retirement. And I think while there are ways to borrow to consolidate and pay down your debt, there are not ways to borrow for retirement.
Got you. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so I see this happen all the time where people will rob their 401k. And I say rob because we do it with the best of intentions. Like, I'm going to take this from here to give me some breathing room and pay off my debt. And I swear I'll put it back into my 401k, right? I'll pay it back, or I'll save more later down the road. But the problem is that, again, life continues to happen and we just don't. We just don't, right? And I don't want you to be in a position where, okay, great, you've eliminated some debt, but now you've sort of sunk your 401k, and you're now in a position where you're going, oh my gosh, that is going to take me 5, 6, 10 years to sort of build back. You hit the nail on the head.
So do you also recommend,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you also recommend against it, even if, say, in the future you wanted to take out money from the 401k to purchase a home or something? Is that like even recommended against? Don't do that either at that point?
I mean, I don't know the entirety of your situation, or any specific situation for that matter, but in general, I always am wary of pulling from retirement accounts for shorter or immediate term purchases, right? Because those are built to cover for you for long term. So when you retire, you may live for another 30 years, and you're going to need these accounts plus Social Security, plus maybe other employer benefits to have income. And I've seen people take out a 401ks to put, you know, a porch in their backyard. To I had a woman who had breast augmentation. She took out from her 401k. Like, people take out for all kinds of craziness, and you, again, with the best of intention that they're going to put it back, and they never do, and they never ramp up retirement accumulation, and that's just not what it's meant for. And so I would hate for you to go from being in a rock and a hard place with debt to a rock and a hard place with retirement. I guess you could argue, Terry, though, that, well, I'm taking it from my 401k to purchase another sort of investment. A home is an investment. I could ultimately sell that, get my equity back. I guess you could make that argument, but I would just rather not see someone try to fund it from their retirement. So I think your idea, Terry, of perhaps, rather than going to a debt consolidation company, because you hit it on the head about, you know, they want you to stop making payments. Man, you know, that's going to really mess up your credit score before it gets better, right? And like you said, you run this very high risk of those creditors not agreeing to the consolidation, right? And you don't know what this debt consolidation company can negotiate and work out and if it'll be successful. So that's a huge risk. I think that better approach that you mentioned of what if I go to my credit union, I tell them the situation and they work with me and my financial situation to take out a lower interest rate loan that I can then get rid of all of these multiple debts and just deal with my credit union. That might perhaps be the more sort of trustworthy way of going that route. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything in here that no, we're talking about credit scores. Oh, I do want to mention, since we are talking about credit scores, one good way to stay on top of your credit score, it's becoming easier and easier for us to see this. All the major banks offer their customers free credit scores and free credit reports that you can have access to. So check with your bank. Annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com. You can get a free credit report. So all of the three major credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, they all funnel through annualcreditreport.com. You can get one there. Even some major credit card companies will offer you a free annual credit report. That's where you can see that credit score. Some apps on your phone, financial apps, will almost in real time show you your current credit score. You could even monitor it on a monthly basis through the app. So there's easy ways for us to access this. We don't need to wait for stuff to be mailed to us, that sort of thing. Wow, lots of questions. Let's go back to some questions now. April.
Okay, there I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, so we may be covering this later. If we're covering this later, you don't feel like you have to answer it now, but I'm considering settling a credit card debt. How, and I've done it before, but how does that affect the score, and is it worth it?
Yep, great question. And I do address that later, but let's just talk about it right now because I mean, you guys are basically reading my mind here. So this is all good. If you are considering debt settlement, okay, the big thing to remember here is that any debt forgiveness is considered taxable if that forgiveness is over $600. So if you owe, let's say $10,000, we'll just use even numbers for easy math, and you're going to do what April's talking about, settling that debt for less than you owe. It could be anywhere from 30 to 60% less. So let's say we do a debt settlement on our $10,000 of $5,000. We get our creditors to settle. They'll take $5,000 for our $10,000 that we owe. That $5,000 that's being forgiven is going to count as taxable income. So you have to be very careful when you do this to make sure that the amount that's being forgiven is not going to, one, bump you up in a tax bracket, meaning that higher taxes are going to be due, right? And that, number two, will that additional taxable income mean that you owe the IRS in any given tax year instead of getting a refund, right? So on the one hand, you may be forgiven some of this debt, but then when the IRS comes around looking for theirs, you may owe them instead, right? So a lot of people will rush to do debt settlement because Yeah, who wouldn't want the amount that they owe cut in half, right? But they jump in and they do that without realizing the tax ramifications, okay? If you settle, going now to the credit score, it's not easy for me to say specifically what that would do to your credit score, but it is going to be on your credit history, and future creditors and lenders are going to see that you had to settle. Okay. The other thing that I would also look out for, if you're doing debt settlement and you're doing it through a company, right? Again, it goes back to what Terry was saying. How successful is that company going to be in reaching a settlement that you're going to be happy with? And then is that company charging you a fee to do that debt settlement? Right? So you may have to pay an upfront fee, and then without the guarantee or even knowing what they're going to be able to negotiate and settle it for. So yeah, April, that's a great question. There is a lot to consider with that. So you definitely have to do your homework. But I think those are sort of the three areas that you want to think about: the tax ramifications, the company that you're doing it with, and will you end up owing taxes instead of getting a refund? Armine, you have a question.
Oh yeah, hi.
Hi.
So my question would be, first of all, I just wanted to just get your opinion. Besides the debt management, there are programs that so they don't consolidate, but they put all your credit cards in a one lower APR kind of a like an account, and you pay your cards with the lower APR percentage rate. And I'm not sure how that hurts the credit, but that was something was like offered lately. My friend did that, so but I don't know if that's something that people can look into that. That's my first question. And also the second one, let's say if someone doesn't have a high credit score, then no credit union will offer any loan with like a lower credit score, then the debt consolidation would be the only option, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, sometimes if you're unable to qualify at a bank or at a credit union, and you are sort of feeling trapped that like the only way for me to do this is debt consolidation, what I would advise in that situation is to make sure that you're working with a credit counseling organization that is certified and is reputable. And I'm going to give you guys some contacts here at the very end of nonprofits that you can trust, that can review your situation first and determine what is sort of the best course of action. And the reason for this, and this sort of answers your first question, Armine, is that you'll see out there that debt consolidation, debt management, and credit repair, those terms are all sort of used sort of interchangeably, right? And oftentimes it's very unclear what they mean by what does credit repair mean? What are they going to actually do? What is a debt management plan? What's actually going to happen, right? If they consolidate into one loan, right? Like Terry was asking, how is that going to affect my credit score? I can't say for certain. What is my interest rate going to be? I can't say for certain, right? So that's why I think it's smarter of us, if we're going to look at those options, to look at certified credit counseling agencies, right? Like I just heard a commercial on the radio just the other day of a car dealership saying, if your credit is bad, we will not only, if we can't finance you, we will repair your credit. Okay, I don't understand this. What does that mean? A car dealership is going to repair my credit? I don't even know how that looks. But yet those phrases are just sort of used very loosely out in the world, because when you are desperate and when maybe in this case you need a vehicle, right? And gosh, if they don't approve me for a loan, they're going to repair my credit. Worst case scenario, they work to repair my credit. Like, we know that we're in desperate waters when we're thinking that a car dealership can quote unquote repair our credit, right? So I give all this sort of extra sort of storytelling and explanation because I just want you guys to be careful, because they seem like easy, simple solutions, but oftentimes these things come up as scams, where they're just collecting an upfront fee, right? They're charging you and they then never really repair anything, right? So I just don't want you to be in that kind of situation. Griselda?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to share that I did consolidate my debt. It was a couple of years ago, and I gave up. I gave up. I told them that I didn't want to do it anymore, because basically what they were doing, they were just and I'm just sharing this, maybe it's helpful for someone.
Yeah, for
since
sure.
we're talking about it. But the thing is that I was just paying and paying and paying, and yeah, they stopped, the phone calls stopped from debt collectors, but what they were doing, my money was being kept like kind of like in a bank of theirs.
Yep.
And they would just pay like maybe $50 in one account, 20 on another, and like it was just little bits of money everywhere where my money was going, and they were keeping a big amount of my money in their bank. So I gave up when I understood what was going on. I said, you know what, I'm done. I'd rather do this on my own. And it took me way less time to do it on my own than depending on this debt consolidation agency that I was working with.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. You bring up a really important point that I haven't addressed yet in a lot of these different programs. You probably heard there that Griselda was talking about this agency or this company requiring her to have a lump sum amount of money in one of their accounts from which they would make her payments for her, right? So a lot of these programs will require that you deposit money in a special savings account for oftentimes 36 months, so 3 years or longer, before these debts start getting settled. Because like Griselda was saying, they would take 20 bucks out of it, put it here, 40 bucks, put it over there. Nothing is really getting accomplished other than Griselda saying she was dumping a ton of money into this account, but nothing was being taken from it from the agency to really effectively pay off her debts. So by taking back control of her situation and sort of being in control of where those dollars went and how the payments were made, actually, paid off. So to that, let me just skip ahead to something that I want to talk about in terms of, and we've talked about this before over the last year or so, ways that you can tackle some of your debts, right? So there's a theory out there called the snowball, the debt snowball, and the debt avalanche, that depending on how much you owe and how many creditors you owe, that a simple way to tackle things is, if you look at this visual here on this PowerPoint slide, is start with your smallest debts first. And sometimes that's counterintuitive, right? Because a lot of people say, Brian, I want to get rid of the big debts or the debts with the most interest rate. Now, we'll be able to do that potentially using the avalanche method, but look at the debt snowball first. Tackle your smallest debts. Like Christian was saying, what if you targeted your smallest debts and said, I am on a mission to get rid of this stuff. And I know that if I extend things out and take longer to pay things off, or I tackle the biggest amounts first, it may frustrate me and I may give up. So what if we took the small ones first, eliminated them, right? And what most people do is they eliminate debts, and then that extra cash flow that they now have because they're not making monthly payments on those little debts, they spend somewhere else. The debt snowball says you pay off the little things first, and then you roll those monthly payments into the next medium-sized debts, so that now the monthlies on those get bigger. And now you're making larger monthly payments on those. And when you eliminate those, then you roll those monthly payments into the big debts, right? And now you're making higher monthly payments on the bigger debts. So it moves from small debt to large debt, but you don't keep the payments the same. As you eliminate debt, you roll those monthly payments into the next bigger size debt, so that your monthlies just get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So you're not making the minimums anymore, right? The thing that I really like about this is not just an easy way to tackle things, but the psychology behind it, right? Like I want to see results. So if I can have victories early on, right, and knock out my small debts, that motivates me, inspires me to now tackle the next set of debts, right? I've got this. I can do this. I'm doing it. And now I'm going to roll this money into paying my next larger set of debts. So it really sort of gives us a hand in terms of how we think and how we manage our money when we're getting those small victories up front, right? You could tackle it the other way. Look at the bottom of the pyramid here, or the bottom of this mountain. We could just start an avalanche, right? But this is a lot harder for us to do because maybe you don't have extra money every month to just throw at your debt, cause an avalanche, pay off the big stuff first and let that slide downhill, and finally get to the bottom and pay off your smaller debts. So first, to determine what strategy is best for you, again, it comes back to knowing the debts that you have and how much you owe. I don't care if you do it in a spreadsheet or if you just do it on a Post-it note. If you have to write it out, write down everything that you owe and their interest rates. So write the balances, write the interest rates, and then determine from there, man, I didn't realize I've got these small little credit cards that are just killing me because there's 30% interest and I only owe like $135. Why have I not gotten rid of this? Why does this continue to linger, right? Then maybe you need to use the debt snowball, pay off those little things, eliminate them, move those payments into the next larger size debts, right? Or maybe you look at all of your debt and you go, wow, I just have a lot of big, expensive debt. I don't have much of like small debts. I just need to power through maybe the ones with the larger interest rate, right? Okay, maybe you're not going to be able to tackle it all. But like Griselda was saying, if you're doing something different about it tomorrow than you are today, you're in more control. And you're going to be in more control than you would be with that debt settlement, that debt consolidation, that debt repair, right? You know best what's going to work for your situation, as long as you just know this is the big picture of my situation, right? So we've got to look at what we owe. We've got to sort of prioritize, list things out, and figure out what we're going to tackle first. And even if your goal is to just tackle one card, isn't that better than what you're currently doing? Yes, most likely, right? So that's one technique, one strategy. Here are the resources that I wanted to give to you for certified nonprofit help. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling, they have certified credit counselors that you can talk to over the phone and can go over your options. There's the website, there's the 800 number. Also, very similar organization, the American Consumer Credit Counseling Agency. That's also a nonprofit, right? So their goal is to help consumers. Their goal is not to make money. Their goal is not to charge a fee, right? Their goal is to provide programs to help you take control and better manage your debt. That's where I would start before letting the car dealership repair my credit, or before settling, or before doing anything else. At least this way, you have a safety net to double check your options. So if you are considering settlement, or you are considering some sort of program, these counseling agencies can at least sort of do a background check, if you will, of those programs and let you know if it's worth it or not. It was so amazing to have so many people on this call with so many questions. We have definitely gone over our given hour mark, but let's just spend a couple more minutes answering some questions, or maybe people want to share what they've been through to help others. I love when you do that. Let's answer some questions. And I think maybe what we do from those questions is perhaps if we need to have a follow-up session from this, we can definitely facilitate that and do that. And Lisa and I will definitely do that. So I think Virginia, I think you had your hand up.
Yes. Hi, good evening.
Hi.
I was just done paying off my latest debt recently, and they're debts that I've been lingering since 2006. So we're talking way back. So I only have a withstanding debt for my car that I recently purchased. I'm working on my credit score. It's getting better. So now I'm pondering I'm being very, very careful as to which credit cards to apply to. So I just wanted to see I know I've heard a lot of great things about Capital One.
Yep.
To build up my credit score a little bit more with Fluent. So is there like a top 3 that you can give?
Yeah, for sure. So first, congratulations on knocking out a long-standing debt. Yeah, definitely. And also congratulations now to sort of, just for a lack of a better way to describe it, being careful and fearful. That is a good thing now, right?
Cautious, yeah.
Yeah, cautious, and just making sure that you make smart decisions so as not to repeat and re-dig that hole that you just got out of, right?
Right.
So actually this sort of intrepidation, sort of fear that you have, to me, that's a good signal. And honestly, I can relate to that because I've been through that in the past, where I didn't use credit for so long because I was so fearful of that debt that when it was time for me to get a credit card, I almost just didn't even want to do it. And so we're dealing with a lot of psychology here too at the same time. So in terms of what cards can you use to sort of dip your foot back in the pool, if you will, Capital One is a great place to start. And here's why. If you go onto the Capital One website, you can put in almost some basic information about your profile, what you're looking to do in terms of, I want to rebuild credit, or I want to be able to take cash advances, or here is my general credit score. And then what they do from that is they will generate almost like a comparison of their cards, where you can compare them side by side to see what's going to be the right card for me. And for somebody that is getting back into credit, There's a couple of different kinds of cards, whether it's Capital One or any other card. One, do not have an annual fee. You do not need to be paying $75 a year for the privilege of using your money, right? Or having the benefits of this card, right? So look for no annual fee.
Okay.
Don't worry so much about the interest rate, because for those of us that are building back our credit and maybe have lower credit scores, they're going to just give us a higher interest rate anyways. So don't be discouraged if they're like, well, your interest rate is based on your profile is going to be 26%. Don't let that freak you out. And don't think, oh, well, the only credit card I'm going to use is if I can get like a low 1, 2, 3% interest rate. It's just not going to happen maybe right now, right? So don't worry about the interest rate. Do not get cards that have bonuses, cashbacks, mileage, points, any incentives. And here's why.
Interesting.
Here's
Okay.
why. Unless you are confident you can handle it.
Right.
Psychologically, that motivates us to use the card and to spend.
Right.
I'll speak from my own experience of even just at Starbucks. For those of you that go to Starbucks and you have a Starbucks card, you get stars for every dollar that you spend. And then you can use these stars for free things. Who doesn't want free things? Who doesn't need coffee in the morning? Who doesn't go to Starbucks anyway? Like, to me, it just seemed like a win-win. And all of a sudden I realized not only was I addicted to caffeine, but I was addicted to getting these darn stars so that I could just get free stuff. And then I got addicted to saving the stars up and racking them up, right? So all that to say that a lot of these incentives on cards with airline mileage and hotels and cash back on our purchases and this and that, in the moment, it's going to make us say, oh, I might as well just put this on the card because I'll get points.
Right.
And we are going to end up racking up on that balance much quicker than we had probably originally wanted, right? And we're going to feed ourselves right back into that scenario of, I'm making minimum payments, I'm not able to dig a hole on this debt. So I would actually just wait for like a rewards kind of credit card until later on down the road. Maybe give yourself 6 months, 12 months. See if you can just use a no frills basic card first.
Okay.
That
Any other
if you can do what Mary was doing, couple small purchases a month.
That
boom.
sounded really like a really good idea.
Yeah.
Even
Boom,
gas
you pay it
purchases.
off. Yeah. Start like that. The other kind of card that I would also recommend for people trying to build credit is it sort of works like a debit card. What it is a credit card, but you front load it with money so that as you use the card, you're actually paying it in full. So for example, you get a card that requires you to deposit $250 onto the card. Okay. So your limit is $250. You can go spend on that credit card, but it's taking, every purchase is taking from your $250 that you've already deposited onto the card. Right?
What is that? Those cards, they're called something. I've been looking into those with my credit union, which is Logix. And they have that. You pay up front, you have a minimal balance, and it's pretty much like a debit card, but you're also working on your credit score.
Exactly. And those cards, because they act like a credit card, they are helping your credit score.
Right.
So it's what's called a prepaid or a secured credit card.
Secured, right.
Yeah, because it's secured by the money that you actually put on it.
Right.
Right. But yet at the same time, it is helping build your credit score.
Got it.
Right.
Wow. Thank you so much for the
Another place to look real quickly, if you want to compare credit cards, is a website called bank bankrate, R-A-T-E, bankrate.com.
Okay.
And you can compare different credit cards from different companies on there. And you can see annual fees, and you can see interest rates, and you can see sort of all the fine print of how the cards work. And you can do it based on your credit score. So you could say, hey, Bankrate, I have poor credit, I have a 530. And they will find you all the good cards for somebody with that credit score. And then you can sort of see them all in one place instead of having to look individually at all these companies.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeffrey, you have a question.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, you know what? A lot of times, me and the friends, we get together and, there's this myth that at least I believe it's a myth. And they say you need to have credit cards, all kinds of credit cards to build your credit. And I don't believe that to be true. But they say, yeah, you got to have all these credit cards. You can't have them closed because if they close, it's going to ruin your credit. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on whether that's a legit thing, because I've managed to maintain good credit myself, and I have lots of credit cards, for different things at one point in time, and I don't keep track whether they're still open. They close eventually if I don't use them like in 2 years. But I wanted to know, I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. Basically, you're correct, Jeffrey, that we don't need a lot of cards to build our credit score, to maintain a good credit score. You don't have to have a variety. Even if you have one or two, let's just say you had a Visa and a MasterCard, right? Or even if you're not using credit cards, but you have a car payment, you have a student loan payment, you're paying those on time. Those are helping maintain a healthy, good credit history and credit score. I did address earlier in the evening that if you do have cards that have zero balance, there's no need to sort of cut them up and close them. Like you were saying, oftentimes if you don't use cards, they'll sort of fall off and close by themselves. But if you have just a couple of open cards, you use them for big purchases as you need them, because maybe you need to extend out that payment just a little bit. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to be putting sort of all of your purchases, and you mentioned going out with friends. This is a prime example. You don't need to be putting meals on credit cards. Again, like we showed in that example, if we bought $500 worth of food over the next couple of months, having gone out to dinner, I don't want to be paying for that food 7 years from now, or 3 years, or even 3 months from now. I don't even want to be paying for that. So try to keep consumables off the cards. There's no need for us to use the cards for that. But again, I do understand if you're in a bind and you're needing to, buy food for the family and you're waiting for that next paycheck or whatever, and it's emergency and you got to put food on the credit card, do it smartly. And you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, there's nothing that says that we need to have, 12 different credit cards and we need to have one of every type, from Discover to American Express to, to Visa and MasterCard and everything in between. Yeah, you could sort of simplify things and it will still work to increase your credit score and your credit history.
Yeah, thank you. And that's exactly what I've done. I've done that myself. And I know friends, they always hear things from different people or other websites or videos or something like that. And of course, it wouldn't surprise me if the credit card industry is part of that, getting people to move, to spend, to purchase, to open accounts up. It's going to build your credit. I mean, that's what we've been told for years,
Yeah.
That's why they go to college campuses, and that's their creme de la creme of getting them here, get a t-shirt, open an account,
Yep. And that's the example that I use. I mean, that was how I got my first credit card when I was in college. Is I actually went to a Dodger game one day and they were giving away free Dodgers t-shirts.
Yeah.
Apply
Yeah.
for a credit card. Well, shoot, I could use a credit card and I definitely want this t-shirt.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it is part of our culture, and it is sort of how we've been taught and marketed to, that like,
Of course, yeah.
this is just how we do things.
Right.
And yeah, it is sort of interesting to where you can see, you know, you go to a credit card company's website and they'll talk about prudent use, right, of credit. But then that's their business. That's how they make money, is
Correct. Yeah.
by sort of helping us feel as consumers that we can manage another card. It'll be fine.
Right.
And yeah, it's just more business for them. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, thank you so much. I was going to add one more thing. I'm sorry. There was another lady that spoke before about this, you know, these credit companies that try to help you negotiate, or your credit card companies, you know, that they try to negotiate with the companies. And I always feel like on the back end, they're always going to do what's beneficial for them. So they could, whatever they negotiate, they could pocket some, give some, pocket some, give some, pocket some. So you might as well just do the negotiation yourself. At least that's how I feel that the industry works, that it's better to get rid of the middleman, because they're going to pocket what they can.
Right.
And they're going to, you know, pay some, keep some.
Yep.
When you can try to do that yourself, you know.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
find someone to help you do that. You know?
Yeah, great point. And I'll just say to that real quickly, if you're having issues with a credit card or with a lender, call them. Just call them. And like Jeffrey's saying, do your own negotiating and talking. Oftentimes we don't want to do that because we don't know what to say. We don't know what to ask for. We don't even want to talk about the debt. Let somebody else do that. But if you are the consumer and you're showing responsibility by trying to go to the company and say, look, I'm having a hard time paying this off. What can we do? What plans are available? How can you help me? Can you put a pause on my interest? Can you lower my monthly payments? Like, what can be done? There's zero harm in asking, right? Because the worst case scenario is they say no. And then you just have to figure out a workaround. But yeah, there's no harm in advocating for yourself. April, you have another question?
Yes. So it's not actually a question, it's just something I wanted to share, but I'll be brief. Just recently, like a week or two ago, I just want to let everyone know about a scam that happened to me and my husband.
Mm-hmm.
$1,900 was stolen out of our bank accounts because of it. So we got a call from Chase Bank fraud department saying that we had fraudulent charges. And just to save you all the details, it turned out to be a scam. And they had not, and they actually ended up taking my ATM card and withdrawing almost all the funds out of all of my accounts.
Oh my gosh.
And so I just want to say to everyone, if you get a call, and they were so convincing. In fact, I was talking to the police officer and he said it was likely people who either work for Chase or formerly worked for Chase doing this fraud, this scam. Wow. So I just want to tell everybody that if you get that phone call of a fraud report, like we've all had before, hang up and call the fraud department yourself to take care of it.
Okay, so what you're saying then is circle back with your bank. You call directly to the given Chase fraud number and see if it's legit.
Yes.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And, you know, it used to be that a lot of these sort of scams and schemes, like we could notice and sort of be like, yeah, this is, you know, total BS. And this is not something I need to follow up on. We get a random text. We get some random email from an address. We don't even, I mean, we know it's not legit. But I think what you're talking about, April, now it's sort of obtained just a completely different level of sophistication.
Oh, yes.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. Armine, you had another question or a comment?
Yeah, just real quick, your thoughts about something that I just recently find out. There are third-party lenders that they charge money, but they found a lender that can give you like a individual personal loan. So what are your thoughts on that? Because like if someone tried, he's not getting any personal loans, but this company is offering something and is able to do that. Is it worth it to pay like 10%? To those companies? Have you heard something like that?
Good question. There are a lot of what we call hard money loans out there, meaning that an individual or a group of individuals is putting up cash that you can borrow, or hard money that you can borrow, and you just deal with that person or that group of people, right? And now there are companies that are facilitating those hard money loans, right? So for example, let's say Armine is looking for a loan. I'm an investor, I have the cash, and I want to make money on my cash by lending it to Armine. I can go through one of these organizations and as an investor, loan my money to her and earn 10%, like Armine was saying. If you're gonna do that, and because you're not qualifying at the bank or the credit union, or you can't find other ways to borrow money, you don't want to use cash advance or payday loans and sort of those other kind of predatory lending practices, I would suggest that you do that, get a personal loan like that through a reputable company. One of them is called SoFi, SoFi.com. And they offer these kinds of loans in different sort of scenarios for different kinds of people. So they offer them for as small business loans. They offer them as student loans. They offer them as personal loans, right? And what they're doing is they are pooling investor money that investors want to lend out at a particular interest rate. And typically with SoFi, there's lower interest rates and there are no fees typically, and there may be no prepayment penalties. So that's the other thing you want to look out with hard money loans, or any loan for that matter, is what are the prepayment penalties? If I borrow this money and then let's say, like, I just want to get it over with and pay it all back, right? And this group hasn't earned their interest that they were hoping, they may charge you penalties because they were wanting you to take your sweet old time so that they could keep charging you interest and keep making money, right? SoFi is a national reputable organization online, SoFi.com, and at least you will know all the fine print and you'll avoid a lot of the high interest, you'll avoid a lot of the fees, the penalties, and the prepayment penalties. Yeah, so that is an option, but I would just, one, be careful, and then two, look for a reputable organization like SoFi.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna stop now. We could talk about this all day long because we have all had personal experience with this. I think it's such an important topic. And I think what I'll do is I'm gonna put my head together with Lisa at Family Promise, and we'll see if we can't have a follow-up to this and perhaps address more questions and address other parts of this topic that we hadn't been able to touch on tonight. So I just want to thank everybody for your time this evening after a long week, after a long day, to then talk about a topic in terms of money that a lot of us want to try to avoid because it's scary and it's frightening. I think if we're talking about it as a group, as a community, that's a good thing. We can only help each other. So I really appreciate you guys being here this evening. I appreciate the great questions. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to Lisa, shoot her an email, and let her know, hey, I have these questions. She can pass them on to me. We can use that to sort of build the follow-up workshop. We would appreciate your feedback. Lisa, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss about upcoming workshops?
Yeah, so just a reminder for all BHC residents, next week, Bronx Collins with Gain Federal Credit Union will be back in and speaking to us about budgeting and debt management. So if this is the first workshop you guys attended, if you guys want to be a part or, be a part of the opportunity drawing that they're doing to get $100 off your rent for the month of June, please make sure to come for next week, because that's basically the last one that you guys will be eligible to enroll yourselves into the opportunity drawing. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me either by email or by phone. And that's it. Oh, just to make sure, it's next Thursday, May 20th at 6 p.m.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.